I was able to teach my kids a very valuable lesson the other night, and that is that misery loves company. And now they love saying that, and the Denver Broncos certainly just got some company on the misery party as the trains are falling off the tracks for multiple teams in the AFC West. The Raiders are all over themselves in this head coaching search, and it has big implications on the Denver Broncos and our special teams coordinator. We get news about the Chargers, like in very big cap situations with Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, and some injury news before the Buffalo Bills take on the Kansas City Chiefs. That and so much more in a double dose of awesomeness on today's video. If you're new to the channel, I'm a diehard Denver Broncos fan named Ben. Helps me in the YouTube algorithm out a ton if you like the Broncos, if you would smash the like and subscribe button. So if you watched the Detroit Lions game against the Commanders the other night, you saw Tom Brady grinning like the Cheshire Cat, thinking that he had indeed secured the belle of the ball, and that is Ben Johnson to be the new coach of the Vegas Raiders. In fact, just even the fact that all the Vegas sites had Ben Johnson favored to go to the Raiders, and it seemed like an absolute shock that Ben Johnson was picking the Raiders over the Chicago Bears, who just drafted a once-in-a-generation talent. And so that was really like the entire thought there was that all indication were that they were just negotiating the deal. There were even talks that Ben Johnson was hopping on the plane after that Detroit Lions game and flying to Vegas with Tom Brady to sign the deal. And all of that is for naught as Ben Johnson took the job with the Chicago Bears. Now, a couple big things about this. First off, like, it is a huge letdown for everyone in Vegas who, like, at one point in time, it looked like they had the number one draft pick. They're going to be able to come out with the quarterback that they wanted. They ended up, like, sneaking out a couple wins, and now they're in that purgatory of, like, not having a great draft pick. And in addition to that, in order to even have a run at getting Ben Johnson, they had to fire their GM, Tom Telesco. And you just see, like, you know, a bunch of my favorite Raiders creators, actually my favorite one, Graph Raider here, showing this meme here of like, what? We fired Tom Telesco for nothing? Like Tom Telesco, who drafted Justin Herbert, who drafted, obviously Brock Bowers, their new offensive lineman who they're obsessed with. Like, he's had a couple fantastic drafts. And so now the Raiders are not only without the coach, they're out without the GM who actually has done a very good job there now that he has had no holds barred. He had a couple bad drafts there with the Chargers, but a lot of that was probably because of ownership. And so you really just see like the revolt starting there in Vegas as this is settling into them, that they are in big trouble here. And so I had this notion that, man, the Bears were going to be, or that the Raiders were going to be able to turn just a couple things around and be back into playoff contention next year. And they have a much bigger uphill battle than we thought. The leader of the clubhouse now for the job there in the Raiders is Pete Carroll, which would be a wild thing to now have every single coach in our division having won at least one Super Bowl in the NFL. I don't think that has ever happened, or at least played in one Super Bowl. Harbaugh won a Super Bowl, right? He won a national championship, got there with Colin Kaepernick again, but I don't know, did he actually win a Super Bowl? But they all appeared in one, and you just look there with Pete Carroll, Sean Payton, Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh. Like, that is a crazy division when it comes to coaching talent, and I think the Raiders may have dodged a bullet. While everyone is saying Ben Johnson is just going to be this whiz kid with like the coolest looking plays and he's going to be amazing, I just keep thinking of dudes like Kliff Kingsbury, dudes like Josh McDaniels, who were phenomenal coordinators and could draw up the coolest plays on paper. But as we've seen with Sean Payton turning this team around, coaching in the NFL is about, like, it's a bundle of skills, and one of them is your ability to motivate players, your ability to build a culture, your ability to get everyone bought in and believing, and that, like, drawing up cool plays is probably, like, skill number 10 you need as a head coach, and so they may have dodged a huge bullet. And while the Pete Carroll ceiling might be lower than Ben Johnson, because yes, Ben Johnson could be Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay, but he also could be a Kliff Kingsbury one-and-done type guy. And even Kyle Shanahan, you saw this year, he draws up really cool plays, but he had a player literally quit at halftime of a San Francisco game. He had the Debo drama, and not every coach is good at every skill, so they maybe dodged a bullet there, missing out on that. Now, to the implications for the Denver Broncos, obviously, we got to play the Raiders twice next year, so that's going to be an implication. The next thing is that Ben Johnson is tied to a bunch of other coaches in the league who are kind of wanting to glob onto that and want to follow him. And so the Chicago Bears are also, they cleaned house. They also are going to need a special teams coordinator. And as you may recall, the Denver Broncos fired their special teams coordinator, and the leader in the clubhouse was Darren Rizzi. kind of like Rizzler's the cool saying. And so there are people thinking that he might indeed, Rizzy, go to Chicago with Ben Johnson. And if that is the case, Mike Westhoff, who was the Broncos assistant coach, thinks that Chris Banjo is in line to step into that position. You just really hope that Banjo doesn't get a job elsewhere in the NFL and the Broncos are left waiting around for their perfect homecoming date and all of the girls already have dates. That would be a bad situation. So I think still my big hope is that Rizzy decides to go with Sean Payton, knowing that, yeah, Ben Johnson might do cool things. You've worked for Sean Payton and know what he can do. Pick us over picking Chicago. And you don't have to worry about the wind. That like coaching special teams in Chicago sounds like the absolute pits with the wind off the lake and the fan base who's just mean. Like people in Denver are cool and Mile High Air. Those punts go forever. Your kicker can make it from 63 yards. So choose Denver. You will not be disappointed. So that's going to be interesting to follow. Who goes with Ben Johnson? Is it Rizzy or can he fall to us? Other crazy pieces of news here is that now that the Raiders position is open, if indeed it is not Pete Carroll, the other leader in the clubhouse that people are still saying have a very good chance is Vance Joseph. So that could be a wild situation as well. If like we have to coach against Vance twice a year, I have a lot of respect for him. The upside to this is if Vance Joseph goes to the Raiders, that we get 2 third-round draft picks for him because of the Rooney Rule and how that works. And so it's really the Raiders. Like, do you want to go with a proven commodity like you have in Pete Carroll? But Pete Carroll is like, pushing 80 by the time this contract ends. He still has a ton of energy, and you see that there. But that's kind of a divided kingdom there in Raiders Nation of do they want Pete Carroll or do they want Vance Joseph? It's probably good news for the Broncos that they did not get their first candidate, and that will be awesome to see. Raiders got a ton of cap space. I think who ends up going to be their head coach will determine what they do cap-wise moving forward. If they get a Pete Carroll, you're going to see them use a lot more cap space on building that defense up. Also, rumors that like if you have Pete Carroll go there, could he reunite with Russell Wilson, knowing that Russell Wilson is probably going to be moved on from the Pittsburgh Steelers? So that would be wild if the Broncos got to play Russell Wilson not once, but twice a year next year as he reunites. And that Pete Carroll liked Russell Wilson. He just didn't like him when he had to be the top paid player on the team, which is something I would probably agree with. That the problem with Russ in Denver wasn't that he was awful. It was that we were paying him to be a Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen type, and he's more of a system quarterback at this time, and we had to pay him like he was a number one, so we couldn't build the team with like tons of talent around him, and he didn't fit Sean Payton's system. But that would be wild to see if those two reunited. But the drama is not just in Las Vegas. The drama is all over our division, guys, because at the same time, that we saw the Chargers this year outkick what the National Football League thought they would and made the playoffs and were actually favored in their game against Houston. And then the Chargers just chargered and lost a game they should have won against a pretty inferior Houston team that I think we would have throttled. And they had to move on from Keenan Allen, Eckler, who we saw pop off the other day for the Washington Commanders. They had to move on from Mike Williams, who we saw make some amazing catches as well. Well, now their top 2 defensive players, they probably are going to have to move on from as well, and that would have massive cap implications for them as well. If you move on from Joey Bosa, which they probably will have to do, they would be talking a $12 million dead cap hit there. And so I think as we see what happens with Deshaun Watson, what we see happens with Khalil Mack, who probably will retire, and Joey Bosa, we're going to see other teams in our division actually have more dead cap money owed to players than us, and that will be a fantastic thing. So let me know what your thoughts are on the Raiders missing out on their head coach candidate. Do you think it is a blessing in disguise if they end up with Pete Carroll or Vance Joseph, or do you think this is just amazing to watch our biggest rival just absolutely crumble into nothing? Either way, we've got a ton to believe in.